Hello there, this is the Shadow Ranger, and I'm going to talk a little more about the sale of Ring of Honor. Just hearing some responses to my other video and just some things I mentioned, I feel there's a couple things that really need to be put into perspective on this issue. So let's go over the facts and each thing. Okay. Right now, I'm looking over some stuff in an article here on 411mania.com, DeMarco File Special Edition, Ring of Honor New Dawn. I'll put the link in the description box. This guy is clearly a Ring of Honor fan. He's, obviously excited for what happened. But I think some of the Ring of Honor fans are getting a little too excited. And I'm saying this. I'm not saying this in any way to bash Ring of Honor fans. I just don't want them to get their hopes up too much. See, far too many times the IWC has been disappointed because we got our hopes up way too much. So I want to talk for a second and put this into a little bit of perspective. Hold on a second. Alright, let me get a second just to get comfortable here and take a drink of juice. Powerade. Okay. Now let's talk what we know for fact and piece by piece. Again, this is just me saying I don't want the Ring of Honor fans to get too overly excited and set themselves up for disappointment. So we're not gonna really know what's gonna really go down till September. So let's try to get everything in perspective first, and then we'll talk more about the impending return of ROH to television in the coming months. And I think we all want to look at some information like what they're going to do, how they're going to go forth, and how much airtime they're going to have. There's a lot more stuff we're going to have to learn. So let's do this piece by piece with what we know and get it all into perspective. First things first. Kerry Silken no longer owns Ring of Honor. He sold it. He sold the whole thing. Alright? Lock, stock, and barrel, 100%. It's gone. He don't own it no more. This group, Sinclair, Sinclair Broadcast Group, they own it. They own the whole thing. Which means they can do with Ring of Honor whatever they want to do to Ring of Honor. Okay? You gotta understand that. If they decide they want to shut it down, they can shut it down. If they wanted to sell it to somebody else, they can. Sinclair could turn around and sell Ring of Honor the rights, lock, stock, and barrel to Dixie Carter or Vince McMahon tomorrow if they want to. It's theirs. Keep that in mind, everybody. So understand that they can alter the product however they want. And also understand they may alter the product in ways that you do not like. They're interested in ratings. And like I said in the other video, in my video You Can Buy Honor, if they want to move more entertainment based, they can. If they want to bring in some ex-WWE talents with name recognition, they can. A lot of people bash TNA for the quote-unquote WWE rejects. Well, if Sinclair Group wants it, there'll be WWE rejects in Ring of Honor. If they want to bring in freaking Kevin Nash, Nash will be there. It's their company now. They own it. Keep that in mind. It's something that people tell you about government. They always say be careful when you give over your rights and powers to government, because every time you give the government power to do something that you want them to do, you also give them power to do something that you don't want them to do. So Sinclair Group, they have the right, they have the power to do everything you want to see done in the Ring of Honor and everything that you don't want to see done with the Ring of Honor. Keep that in mind. And that is I'm saying that one first because it's the first thought that came into my mind, and I think it's the most important thing that really needs to be put into perspective about this turn of events. Now, a positive side, they don't have to worry about losing television. They're owned by the people who own them also own the television networks that they're going to be on. So unlike TNA, they don't have to worry about the network asking them to do something. I listened to an interview with Hulk Hogan yesterday, and he talked about that, about sometimes, having to not, instead of doing what the fans want, having to do what the network wants. He says he made a very good point that a lot of people fail to understand. That he said, if I put on Matt Morgan, and Matt Morgan gets a rating, and then later in that same episode I do a segment with Ric Flair, and Ric Flair's segment gets twice as high or 3 times the rating, the network's gonna want me to put Flair back on. And sometimes it's a battle where the fans want to see more Matt Morgan, and they want to see that. And I hear the fans. He talks about he even mentioned the Twitter campaign, the Matt Morgan for Champion Twitter campaign has been going on for a long time. He says I read those. I understand that they want, but if I got the fans saying we want more Matt Morgan, and then I got the network saying to put Ric Flair on, and I don't have enough time to do them both. Sometimes I have to do what the network says. I need to keep the network happy. So sometimes, even though I understand that maybe a lot of the fans may not want to see Flair, if the network wants him on, I got to put him on. Hogan and that's a good point that Hogan makes. So TNA, they do have to placate to the network. Spike TV is very important. TNA's TV is very, very important to them. So they don't have as much leeway. Sometimes they have to kind of bow out and say, do what the network says. A lot of people have kind of called this new mask character they introduced, Sangriento, kind of corny, and I kind of think it's corny too. But understand that the network wanted them to do that. They said they wanted them to introduce a new mask character to be a response to WWE introducing Sin Cara. And maybe Hogan thinks that's stupid, and maybe Bischoff and Russo and they all think it's stupid, but the network says we want you to do it. They really have to do it. Now, Ring of Honor is going to have an advantage where they're not going to have to worry about that, because the network owns the company too, so they're not going to have to placate to them as much. The people who own the company also own the network. They can be put on at any time they want and be given as much TV time they want. That was an advantage that Ted Turner had with WCW. So that's a positive part for Ring of Honor on this. The new television show doesn't debut until September, but the first taping is in August. So it really depends if this is going to be like last week of August and air first week of September. How much in advance are they going to be taping? That's going to be a difficult thing. If they're going to be like they were on HD Net, where they tape shows like 2 months before they air. I think they finished like the last HD Net taping was in, I think, January, and it didn't air until April. That's an issue that you're going to deal with. Other facts we need to talk about. It's only the networks that Sinclair Group owns are only in 22% of American households. So only 22% of American households will actually be able to watch Ring of Honor on TV. So keep that in mind. If you're not in one of the areas, and Sinclair Group has a website, you can go to their website, and I will put the link to their website in the description box too, so you can look. I'm living in Korea now, but I live in America. My home in America is in Mississippi, and I checked the website, and they don't have an affiliate in Mississippi. So if I were back in the U.S. and Mississippi, where my family is, I wouldn't be able to watch Ring of Honor on TV. But luckily, they're going to also put the weekly episodes online, so people all over the world can watch them. So that's how I'll be watching them. Either I'm going to be downloading or stream ripping it from the website, like I do with the NWA Hollywood show. So at least they're going to be available. Their weekly show is going to be available worldwide on the internet. Again, only 22% of households in America will be able to watch it on TV. So that's going to really affect the concept of ratings. I mean, I would recommend it if you live in an area where it's on. Make sure you there to watch it to give it as many help it get as many rating points as it can. But keep it in mind. So if you thinking they're gonna be going head to head with TNA or a ratings war, we're not getting another wrestling war out of this one. When TNA is available in I think in 95, 96% of households, and they're only going to be available in 22. But maybe they can sell syndication to get it on other networks. It's going to be an issue. This may not be everywhere, so you may not even be able to watch it on your television. That's another important thing you're going to need to keep in mind. But it'll be on the internet for everybody. That's good too. All right. Another point this guy makes is that when you really think about it, this deal was probably in the works for months, because deals like this don't happen overnight. All right, and he pointed out some things that were, if you had really stopped to think about it, a couple months ago I predicted when ROH lost their television deal that they would get a new one by the end of the year. But but this guy makes some really good points. If you really stopped to think about it, you would have been able to figure out that they already had a new deal coming up. Think about it. All right, remember when the HD Net deal ended? Notice how when people were being interviewed from Ring of Honor after the HD Net deal ended, nobody was upset. And not like they just pretending like, hey, it's not a big deal, we'll be all right. Nobody was, and that's a big deal, losing your TV network. And nobody in Ring of Honor was upset about it. They were like, yeah, it's okay, we'll be all right. And they sounded way too confident that everything was gonna be just fine, even though they lost their television deal. And you notice that Ring of Honor got Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin to make long-term commitments and sign deals with them, when one phone call to Kurt Angle, they could have easily gotten into TNA. I know TNA is on the thing about not hiring as many not hiring ex WWE guys unless they were really big stars, and there's a lot of people in ex WWE guys like MVP and Carlito and Kaval that haven't gone to TNA. Well, Kaval hasn't gone back to TNA. And Haas and Benjamin could have probably easily gotten in just with one good word from Kurt Angle to Dixie Carter, could have gotten jobs in there. But yet they made long-term commitments with Ring of Honor, and have even taken a few and Haas has even taken a few shots at Ring of Honor in interviews since then. He ain't stupid. Charlie Haas not stupid. He would not be. He knows he ain't going back to WWE no time soon. He would not be taking any kind of shot at TNA unless he was confident about his future paychecks for the next couple of years or so. Three, there is still a television title. I have been thinking that for a while. How does Ring of Honor Ring of Honor is the only company that has a television champion with no television show. You think that if they was gonna be off television for good or for a long foreseeable future, they wouldn't have a television title anymore. But yet they still had a television championship. And Christopher Daniels still the television champion, and I think he had some title defenses. I remember saying something like, it would be kind of cool if Daniels had a feud with Gunner and beat him, because then he'd have like the ROH television title and the TNA television title. He could call himself like the king of television, of wrestling television or something like that, because he's television champion in both companies. But they still had a television title. You think if a company didn't have television, they wouldn't have a TV title. But yet they did. If there wasn't already some deal in place to get them back on TV, they probably would have changed the television title's name to something different. So just small things, but I'm like, this probably if any of us had really taken the time to really sit down and think, we could have really figured out, like, of course they have a new deal coming up. Something's up. Just simple stuff like that. Let's see here. What else do we need to talk about? We don't know how much money Sinclair Group is going to put into the Ring of Honor project. I mean, I've read that they're going to, put in enough money to up the production values and stuff, but, You know, are they gonna put in enough money for them to do a lot more advertising? Or they're gonna put enough money into this where they can afford to not have to tape all their shows so far in advance? At least get to the point where they can tape at least on the same schedule that TNA does. You know, even the TNA schedule is not great, but you know, it's much better tape schedule than ROH was doing on HD Net, where they were taping shows months in advance. You know, that's another thing you got to think about. We don't know how much money is going into this group, into this project. Let's see here. Check my time real quick. I'm at 15 minutes. Now, it's saying that the current staff who runs it are going to stay in charge. They're going to have the same booker, and Cornette's going to be the producer, and Kerry Silken is going to be there in some capacity. Again, but that's only until Sinclair decides they don't want him. Keep in mind, Sinclair could get rid of all those dudes tomorrow if they want to. TV show. The first taping is going to be in Chicago on August 13th. So you got to wonder how many shows they're going to tape. You know, are they going to bring the show back to the regular televised pay-per-view or leave it on iPay-per-view? They're going to have to, you know, contract. If they're going to try to make this thing grow, you're going to have to start paying the wrestlers more. So is Sinclair going to put in enough money to pay the wrestlers enough a competitive wage? Because on the one hand, you think, you know, a company like WWE or TNA could, you know, offer the guys more money and try to steal them. So is Sinclair Group willing to put in enough money to pay wrestlers enough that, hey, they can be competitive, and they're not, and enough that the wrestler isn't going to jump ship? You know, they're going to have to start protecting their talents. You know, somebody made asked about, you know, yesterday about Christopher Daniels. What's going to happen with him? I'm saying Christopher Daniels is going to have to make a choice. If Sinclair Group is serious about Ring of Honor, and they're serious about making this thing go well and make this thing grow and become a legitimate big time player, then they can't have dudes going between the companies. They're gonna probably want to try to compete with TNA in some effect, then work with them. So, you know, they're not gonna want Daniels. They're not gonna push Daniels as long as he's appearing on TNA, and TNA's not gonna push Daniels as long as he's appearing on Ring of Honor. You know, they'll probably take that television title off Daniels. They're not gonna risk TNA trying to sew up Daniels a chunk of money to come on there and trash the Ring of Honor belt. But then TNA's like, well, fuck, we're not gonna have him. We're not going to put one of our belts on him, and they try to offer him a chunk of money to come on their show and trash our belt. So he's going to have to choose. Daniels is going to have to make a choice. And the TNA fans want him in TNA. And the fans want him in both companies. The Ring of Honor fans want Daniels in Ring of Honor. The TNA fans want Daniels in TNA. I'm a TNA fan. I want Daniels in TNA. So I guess what could end up being good for him is that since both companies know he's talented and both companies know that their fans want him, there could be a bidding war for Daniels, which is going to be great for Daniels. That's security. So that's always a good thing. That's good for him. And if there's a bidding war for Daniels, there could be bidding wars for other guys. You know, what happens the next time Samoa Joe's contract comes up? And, you know, he went back to TNA, but, you know, he pretty much resigned after he got everything settled out. He was only not under contract for a very short time and got everything ready. You know, maybe next time Ring of Honor gives Joe a call and say, hey, won't you come talk to us for a minute, Joe? Maybe we can do something. You know, you might see some guys that aren't getting used the way they want to get used in TNA go to try to take a shot in Ring of Honor, and vice versa. And, you know, that's always good for the wrestlers. Helps them get more money. But, yeah, dudes are going to have to start signing contracts and making long-term commitments to Ring of Honor. And will they attempt to bring back some guys that have been in WWE? You know, what if CM Punk really does end up leaving WWE, and now with this new group, maybe Sinclair can offer to foot the bill to pay CM Punk a good wage and say, hey, Punk, come back here. And now CM Punk, with the star power he's gained in WWE, can take that star power, come back to Ring of Honor with it. Samoa Joe can take some of the star power he's gained in TNA, take that back to Ring of Honor. Senshi Low-Ki Caval can take some of the notoriety he got off NXT, bring that back to Ring of Honor. That's always a possibility. Do we still consider Ring of Honor an indie fed? We consider them to be the top indie promotion. As this goes down, or afterwards, well, we don't really know to September, but until we know how far Sinclair, how much Sinclair is going to invest in this and how serious they are, will we still consider ROH to be an indie fed? And if we don't consider them to be an indie fed, and we consider them to be the number third, and now we consider them to be a big three companies now, you know, who's now going to be considered the top indie fed? For me, that'd probably be NWA Hollywood, maybe Chikara. I like both of those, but that's a whole nother discussion. Alright, I'm already at 21 minutes. What else? What else? If this is successful, will other production companies like Sinclair want to get into this game too? That's another thing too. You know, this guy mentioned something. You know, he says, you know, the Chikara would be great for a network like G4, which I have to agree. I used to watch a lot of G4 when I was in the U.S. and when I was in college, and yeah, Chikara would probably would be great on that channel. And if this turns out really good for this Sinclair group, with other companies that are the same size they are decide, hey, you know, this wrestling thing worked out well for Sinclair and made them a lot more money, maybe we should get in on this too. And they start looking at some indie promotions and say, hey, maybe we could buy this and put some money in here, and you know, try to do that. You know, that could work out well too. But again, that's something that's yet to be seen. We're gonna have to wait and see on that one. Check my time. Alright, I'm at 23 minutes. Alright, then the next part of this says, what does this mean for WWE and TNA? He kind of gets into a bit of TNA bashing here, but he says this guy asked the question: can ROH overtake TNA as the number 2 promotion in the USA? It'll take years. TNA has way more. Although the companies are the same age, TNA has way more money, way more exposure. Again, we've yet to see how much money Sinclair is gonna put into Ring of Honor, because this is just one thing they own out of many. Yes, they did make over $600 million in 2008, but how much of that money? But we don't know how business was in 2009 and 2010 and so far in 2011, and if they've made as much or less or more, and then how much of that money are they going to sink into it? They can have way more money than Dixie Carter and Panda Energy, but are they going to put as much money as Panda Energy does into TNA? Also, TNA already has international exposure. Ring of Honor is going to have to really work hard to catch up. So could they ever overtake TNA as number 2? It'll take possibly, if things go very well, but it would take a long time. This will take several years. Don't think for a minute that suddenly Ring of Honor is going to be considered the number 2 promotion. They're going to start making more money than TNA does and higher TV ratings. No. There's not enough homes. They don't have enough money to start off with. It's gonna take if they do ever overtake TNA, it'll take a very, very long time. You might like it more than you like TNA. That doesn't mean they're bigger. Hey, I like TNA more than I do WWE, but they're in no way bigger than WWE. That's what I'm saying. Anything else I want to point out about this? But overall, hey, it's good for wrestling. It's good for the business. Anytime any promotion can come up, it's good for the business at all. Anytime a company is gonna have money put into it, where they can really try to compete, it's good for it all. Like I said before, I'd like to see this new ROH show on Thursday nights, head to head with TNA. There are only not going to be as many homes, but hell, if they could, that would be good. I'd like to see some new competition. Thursday Night War would be just fine with me. I would be signing with TNA in this war, and it'd be ROH would have to work to turn me, but hey, I'd give them a fair shot. Like I said before, I'm going to give this show a fair shot when it comes on, and I'll give you my thoughts come September. But alright, I'm already at 26 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. This is just a few things I wanted to talk about more on this topic and try to put some things into perspective. I'm gonna probably do more videos on this as we go along, because in the coming months, again, it's May, so we gotta get through June, July, and August. But my contract at my current job ends at the end of July. So by the time this show comes on, I'll either have started a new job, re-signed with my current job, or I'll be back in the U.S. somewhere. So at some point, there'll have been a major change in my life will have occurred before this show starts. But as we learn more information, I'll keep talking about it, and as we look forward to the September date. Alright, so I've talked long enough. This is the Shadow Ranger. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.